Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for being with us this afternoon on this beautiful day. We'll get started here and some people may continue to roll in, but we'll get the meeting going. So my name is Kristen Lillyman and I'm an engagement specialist with Dillon Consulting and will be your third-party facilitator today. We are working with the city to coordinate and facilitate the engagement for the Municipal Comprehensive Review, or as you may know it, our Plan Toronto. Many of you may have attended and participated in meetings with the city on the official plan in the fall. And this is an update meeting specifically on policies related to environment and climate change, which we'll get into in detail in this presentation. So I just want to make a procedural note here that this is an open house being held pursuant to the Planning Act as the city proposes to revise policies in the official plan through the Municipal Comprehensive Review process. And that's under Section 26 of the Planning Act. The draft official plan policies related to environment and climate change were presented for consideration to the March 25th meeting of Planning and Housing Committee. These draft policy updates are included in a staff report, item PH 32.6, and they have been shared with participants of this meeting through the meeting invite, and also we're going to share a link in the chat now. So this report is also linked on the official plan review webpage, which is toronto.ca/ourplan. And we also just want to make sure all of you participants are aware that staff are targeting to bring these updated draft policies to a special public meeting at Planning and Housing Committee on May 31st. So I'm just going to begin today with a land acknowledgement. The City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The City also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Acknowledging the land that we are on is only a small piece of recognizing the contributions and the history of Indigenous peoples and our progress towards reconciliation. It is also important to recognize that the Indigenous connection to the land we now call Toronto, as well as Lake Ontario, dates back at least 10,000 years. A key part of this project, our Plan Toronto, is and has been the integration of Indigenous perspectives and understandings as part of this process. Many of the Indigenous perspectives we have heard do relate to the environment with preservation and climate change, and we welcome questions on this. So the agenda for today, it includes a project update and where we are in the process, along with what we've heard so far. So we've had many meetings to date on our Plan Toronto, and we'll be providing some reflections on this to you today. The city will then share what they've been working on, so including the overall direction that the official plan is taking and the draft policies related to environment and climate change. There will also be time for feedback, discussion, and questions at key points in this presentation and also at the end. So a few introductions on who is in the meeting today. So we're joined by those who are leading the official plan: Kyle Fearon, Janani Mahendran, and Jeff Cantos, as well as those specializing in environmental planning at the city with us today, including Jane Welsh, Jane Weninger, Shayna Stott, and Josh Wise. We also may have staff today with us from Solid Waste and the Energy and Environment City Divisions. From Dillon Consulting, along with myself, Kristen Lillyman, we have Nicole Bugley and Ish Chowdhury, who will be helping me today manage the polling that we'll be doing and also managing the meeting behind the scenes. I would also, at this point, love for participants to introduce themselves in the chat. It'd be great to know who is joining us today. So just some housekeeping to get us started. Please remain muted while you're not talking. If you do have a question or comment, you can use the raise hand function or type your question into the chat box. And on that note, use the chat. It will be monitored by staff and questions may be responded to live there. There will be, as I mentioned, dedicated points in the presentation for discussion. and that's to address questions and listen to comments and feedback. Just a reminder to please introduce yourself before asking a question. I want to also note that this meeting is being recorded. We are only going to post the presentation component to the website. The comments and question and discussion period with participants, that will be used for note-taking purposes only. And then just a last note here on my role as meeting facilitator. So my job is to manage the discussion, and we ask that to help allow everyone to have their say and ensure that everyone is able to participate, we ask that you think about and raise the question that you most want answered. There are a lot of people on the call today, and so we strongly suggest one question per person at a time, and you will be held accountable to that. And I just want to also note that if you don't get your question answered live, Q&A will be in the engagement records. So a few guidelines for participants today. As mentioned, we do welcome your questions and discussion. That's why we're here. We're here to listen, and there are no bad or wrong questions. We want to hear from everyone. We believe that everyone has wisdom and experiences to share. And by sharing, we do believe that you would help contribute to a better outcome. A reminder to be respectful and listen. Everyone deserves to be heard. And of course, we'd always expect that there will be differences in opinion. The city, as I mentioned, is here today to listen and respond to your comments and questions. You are also welcome, as always, to reach out after the meeting. So as mentioned, the chat box is live and should be available throughout the meeting today. We are encouraging the use of the chat box. You can share ideas there, you can ask questions, and you can get to know each other just like you might at an in-person event. The City Project team will be monitoring the chat and will respond there when they can. A reminder to be respectful in the chat. We do want to keep it active, and if there are disrespectful or abusive comments, we will have to close the chat. So meeting purpose, why are we here today on this beautiful sunny day? We are going to provide an update on the official plan review and an overview of the policies related to environment and climate change. We also want to hear your feedback. So we're going to open it up at those key points for discussion and dialogue. Then we want to also share the next steps on this project with you and tell you how you can continue to be engaged. So this slide provides a high-level picture of the official plan. I'm just going to hand it over to Kyle on the official plan team to speak to this.
Great, thanks so much, Kristen. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm just going to talk really quickly about what the official plan is and does. And for many of you may already know, but the purpose of it is to provide a roadmap for Toronto's growth for the next 30 years. And I'll just speak quickly about how we try to accommodate that growth. So we know that the province sets minimum density targets, so minimum population and employment targets. And our role is to demonstrate that we can conform to those provincial targets. And so part of this process is about demonstrating that we have a plan in place that can accommodate 700,000 new residents and 450,000 more jobs over the next 30 years. I think we all kind of know we'll surpass these. We tend to look at these as minimums. And so the focus of this exercise isn't so much about those numbers, it's more about how we grow. And so today we're focusing on a particular part of how we grow, which is to do with the environment and climate change. And so we know we need to grow sustainably with resilience, and we know we need to address climate change. And so I'll speak a little bit more about where we are with our progress and next steps. But for now, I'll pass it back to Kristen.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. So now we're just going to have a quick engagement moment, that polling questions that I mentioned earlier. So you can use your smartphone or your web page browser and go to www.menti.com, and you'll enter code, or you can also scan the QR code that you see on the screen there with your smartphone. And once you get to the page, you'll enter code 44085102. And there's going to be a series of questions we'll ask you. And now I'll hand the screen over to Nicole to share her screen. Okay, great. So we already have some people participating. So we'll leave this question up for a minute or so. So we have many people from Toronto East York, and we have kind of a handful of people from across the city and some outside of Toronto. So if you haven't accessed this before at menti.com, you can see the instructions on the top of your screen still. So you'll go to www.menti.com and the code's up there still. See more people kind of participating. Okay, so maybe we'll go to our next question. So this is about, have you participated in other meetings related to this project and other engagement activities? So this is a simple yes, no question with some not sure, you might not remember. So we have a fair amount of new people to this project. So thank you for joining us for the first time. And we have many people who have also been with us before, so thank you for returning. Okay, so the bulk of people have not participated in the other engagement activities. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question. So this is for the people who had participated before. How did you previously participate in the citywide meetings that we've had, other virtual meetings, completed an online survey, a member of the community leader circle, or if you have participated on social media or through the website, taking a look at some of the materials there. Okay, so we have some people who have attended virtual meetings before, and a couple that have completed an online survey, and someone who has participated on the website. Okay, great. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. Please leave that Menti open because we are going to have another question later on in the presentation. Okay, so now I'm just going to provide a bit of an overview of the project to date, what we have heard, and where we are now. So this provides a quick snapshot of the project process. The project initially launched in May 2021, and we've gone through parts 1, which was the vision and priorities, and then part 2, asking the big questions and also setting policy directions. During that time, the city and our Dhillon engagement team were doing a lot of listening through public meetings, youth engagement, online engagement and surveys, meetings with Indigenous rights holders and organizations, and through a community leader circle. So now we're at the point where the city is creating draft policies, some of which will be presented today. And we're here in part 3. And we are continuing to meet with people and organizations and the public, like this meeting today, to discuss our Plan Toronto. I do want to again note some key future meeting dates for the environment and climate change policies, and that is the May 31st Planning and Housing Committee statutory public meeting, followed by City Council on June 15th. We will share those dates again with you at the end of the presentation as well. So this is just a bit of an overview of the engagement to date. In part 1 and part 2, we held over 50 meetings and met with over 1,700 people, including various internal and external stakeholders, organizations, companies, residents, that kind of thing. And this work also included a focus on reaching underrepresented populations and organizations that also work with them. So that included Indigenous rights holders and organizations, youth, and that was through schools and school boards, seniors through the Seniors Roundtable. And then we had some focused conversations like around accessibility and specific geographies like Scarborough. We also had an online component. The Our Plan website got over 9,000 visits to the site, and there were nearly 2,000 visits to our Story Map site, which is our online resource to explore information and maps related to Our Plan Toronto. So this word cloud summarizes feedback we heard from part 1. Feedback was around key interests and key items people want to see for Toronto in 2051, so that long-term vision. And you can see some emerging words here, including sustainable, inclusive, climate, progressive, dynamic, green, affordable, so many related to the topic we have today. Plus some concerns emerged, like overdeveloped, underwater, unaffordable. So through that process, I do want to note that we did receive both positive and negative feedback as part of that visioning exercise. So in part 2, some big challenges emerged for the city. Like environment and climate change, challenges also included equity, how to create healthy and resilient communities, the recovery from the impacts of COVID, housing supply and affordability, and many others. So our team has organized all of this input collected through part 1 and part 2 into key themes. On the left of your screen, you can see the cross-cutting themes, and these are themes that came forward in every meeting across different organizations and groups, in different communities with Indigenous groups. And what emerged was having a key focus on equity and inclusion, relationship building, community-led solutions, and that was especially when it came to big change in neighborhoods like big development, learning from the past and implementation, aligning priorities and conversations, so getting everyone on the same page, and that included leadership alignment as well. The other themes in the darker green on the right side were themes that emerged most frequently discussed. So these were issues and topics like housing affordability and the scale of intensification, environment and climate change, why we're here today, jobs, particularly that was heightened through COVID, safety, complete communities, and that's where every neighborhood needs a complete approach and have a universal design so people don't age out. So this slide narrows down the feedback to this feedback specific to the topic we're talking about today, environment and climate change. And this is discussion items that came up from part 1 and part 2 and includes comments from youth and from the Indigenous groups where this topic emerged as very important. So what we have heard so far was get to net zero, implement climate goals laid out by Transform TO, more environmental equity across the city, a network of transit and mobility options that are sustainable, coordination with the Toronto Green Standard, protection of and access to our green spaces, including our ravine system, bringing forward Indigenous voices and Indigenous perspectives on how we plan for climate action and how we protect our green spaces, access for quality spaces, and quality being key here. Currently, it was noted that there was not equitable access to these quality spaces. And then finally, protecting trees and our tree canopy. So we'll have another engagement moment here, and we'll go again to the Mentimeter, so menti.com. And I'll hand it over to Nicole's screen so we can see the results. We have, I think, just one more question for you. So this is just to get a sense of what you're most excited to hear about today in our conversation and in the presentation. We have a variety of topics up on the screen there. You can see a wide variety of responses coming through. So I can see climate change emerging as the most common thing that people are most interested in for this meeting. I see also land use being quite popular, and I will say that there are future meetings that will get into land use in more detail. This meeting is specific about those climate change and environment policies. But there will be more meetings that dig into intensification and land use later in May. And we'll get into that in the next steps. But there's also people who are here to talk about trees, Indigenous perspectives, circular economy, green spaces, net zero. And for those who have said other, curious, you can just add that into the chat. If you're interested in a different topic, feel free to pop that in the chat. We'd love to know what you want to talk about today. Okay. I'm just waiting for one person to say water because it's the lone one in there with no comments, but that's okay. That's okay. You're being honest. That's great. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. So I'm going to go to part 2 of our presentation today. I've given you the snapshot of the key things we have been hearing to date, and I'll now hand it over to Kyle to kick it off to present about the broader official plan policy directions.
Sure, thanks, Kristen. Hey again, everyone. So I'm just going to give you a quick update on overall progress and talk about some of the next steps we're taking as part of the overall official plan review. Maybe I'll start by mentioning something that I saw in the chat there from Amelia. She asked, how come the 2051 date is used when the net zero plan is to get there by 2040? And so the 2051 date is about the lifespan of the plan. So what we typically do in Ontario as part of the planning system is plan forward for a 30-year period. And so 2051 is what we call the time horizon of this official plan. So it will plan for the next 30 years, and that would take us to 2051. So hope that helps clear up why we use that number. So a couple things that have happened since December. We've had a lot of reporting go forward. Can we just go back to the earlier slide, Kristen? I'll cue you. Thanks. We've had a lot of reporting happen since December when we last came and spoke to some of you. And I'll just mention a couple of things there. So one is we've been reporting out on employment land conversion requests. We received over 140 of those, and we've done preliminary assessments of all of those to Planning and Housing Committee. We've also reported out on over 120 draft major transit station area delineations. So those are out for consultation. And we also have 16 final protected major transit station areas adopted by council that are now awaiting ministerial approval. So those are some big pieces of reporting that we're doing. These all have to do with this big conformity exercise of us showing the province, like I mentioned earlier, that our plan conforms to the provincial growth plan and all the provincial policies. So within all that, there's a lot of ongoing engagement, and we have a lot more to come. So please go to our website for updates. We'll drop a link in the chat there for you. And there's a subscribe function at the bottom of the page where you can put in your email and you can receive newsletter updates for upcoming meetings. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about the next phase of the project. We're going to be going to Planning and Housing Committee on April 27th, so just in a couple weeks, and we're going forward with our preliminary directions for Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 is sort of the vision and guiding statements of the official plan, and the philosophy that we verbalize there is going to make its way into all the other policies of the plan. So it's really important that we articulate the vision of the city through that Chapter 1 document. And you're going to see a lot of connections here between what Kirsten was mentioning earlier for sort of the key themes that we've heard from people. So Kirsten, can we go to the next slide? Great, thank you. So the first big theme that we're going to be talking about for Chapter 1 is Indigenous planning perspectives. So the first thing is the role and importance of land acknowledgements. We don't want it to be like a pledge of allegiance And so we're going to be putting some thought to that. We're also looking to amplify Indigenous voices in the planning process. That's something we've heard a lot about, which is really about trying to build meaningful engagement. And that starts with building and maintaining relationships. So that's something the city takes seriously. We just had the Reconciliation Action Plan adopted by council last week. And so this is part of planning, tying in some of those principles there. It also means deepening our understanding of contemporary urban Indigenous realities and experiences. We understand that these needs are distinct and the city needs to be responsive to those. And again, we take our cues from the Reconciliation Action Plan on that, and so there's more to come. And finally, placemaking and placekeeping initiatives. And of course, this is really critical for land use, and the initiatives are going to be really varied on this. And so look out for some more to come on that. Next slide, please, Kristen. Great. So the next big piece of chapter 1 is the vision statement. And so the first thing that the vision statement is going to talk about is eliminating disparities. And we know from a recent report by the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild that many of the impacts of COVID-19 were disproportionately felt by a lot of Toronto's neighborhoods. And so the official plan can contribute to that by promoting complete communities for people of all ages and in all neighborhoods. Part of that is access to necessities for daily living. Another part of it is a mix of jobs and services, as well as providing a full range of housing. The next part of the vision statement is what we're here to talk about today, which is prioritizing climate change action and sustainability and toward net zero by 2040. So really what that means for us is applying a climate change lens to all aspects of planning. And finally, it's also going to speak to becoming the most inclusive city in the world. We know Toronto is going to grow, and so our goal is to continue to welcome newcomers to Canada and to support opportunities for a better life, pathways to prosperity and diversity. Next slide, please, Kristen. Great. So, and finally, the chapter 1 is going to talk about these big principles of how we want to grow. So the first one is improving access to the many facets of daily life. And part of this means enabling access to a whole host of things like affordable housing and complete communities. And next is applying an equity lens. As you heard from Kristen earlier, that's something we heard a lot about. There's a lot to unpack there. But really what it means is applying an equity lens to planning decisions. And one important highlight, I think, is building capacity among not just all Torontonians and stakeholders, but also councillors and businesses to better understand all the challenges that are faced by all Torontonians. And finally, it's about creating a fair and inclusive city for everyone. So part of that's removing physical barriers for individuals so that they can lead independent lives. And it's about providing dignified and supportive housing for vulnerable populations. So that's just a quick highlight of what's to come, and there will be more. So like I said earlier, please subscribe to the mailing list if you're interested in any of these other subjects. In May, we're going to be having a lot more meetings on these. And so check out the project page if you want to learn more. We'll put some links in the chat and subscribe to that newsletter. So I'm going to pass it over to Jane now.
Great, thanks, Kyle. We could have the next slide. So Toronto has a strong legacy of introducing leading-edge policies to protect the natural environment and address climate change, and of also developing innovative tools such as the Toronto Green Standard, the Green Roof Bylaw, the Ravine and Natural Features Protection Bylaw to implement them. And I really have to add that we've been successful in this due in no small way to the advocacy and collaboration with the public and stakeholders like yourselves that challenge us and help us to advance requirements by advocating and increasing awareness of the issues. In 2014, we drafted an updated and revised official plan policies with a climate change and resiliency lens, including the addition of 68 new environmentally significant areas and a requirement to submit an energy strategy for all large developments as part of a complete application. Next slide. So even further back, in 2009, we did an extensive review of our legal abilities and amended the official plan using the site plan provisions in the City of Toronto Act to create the Toronto Green Standard and require submission of the Tier 1 checklist as part of a complete application. And to date, there's been over 2,100 applications that have been required to meet the Toronto Green Standard. And it's only recently that other Ontario cities are following our lead and using the same tool to create their own green standards. Next slide. And at the same time, we introduced a Green Roof bylaw, which we had special authority for. And since 2010, it has resulted in over 1,000 new green roofs in the City of Toronto. Next slide. So in preparing the draft policies, we are mindful of our role at the local scale of addressing the international crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. And of course, the most recent announcement from the UN's International Panel on Climate Change, that the world is running out of options to hit climate goals, amplifies the urgency of taking action and ensuring city building activities address climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. It's also important to note that the UN's Global Biodiversity Outlook, a 5, done in 2020, stated that some progress has been made in countries and areas, especially where there is appropriate policies have been put into place. Next slide. So our proposed revisions to the official plan policies are based on conformity to the growth plan, the provincial policy statement, the provincial food and organic waste policy statement, directions from City Council through adoption of the Toronto Green Standard last July regarding waste diversion, and through adoption of Transform TO, which requested city planning to continue to ensure that the official plan zoning bylaws, policies, and guidelines support the recommendations of the net zero strategy. It was also to address commitments that we made during the previous 5-year review to review and add environmentally significant areas, and of course, very importantly, the input that we received through this consultation process. Next slide. So in this presentation, we're highlighting proposed changes under 3 themes: net zero and climate mitigation, resilience and adaptation, waste and circular economy. And we recognize that there is an overlap between these categories. Next slide. So in terms of net zero and climate mitigation, we have added reference to the new target to achieve net zero by 2040. And this graph, if you can read it, underlines the urgency of that. It shows our modeled greenhouse gas emissions from Toronto community-wide in megatons for the years 2020 to 2050 in different scenarios. So the light red Build as Planned scenario shows that based on currently planned programs and scale of action by all parties, Toronto will not approach net zero. So the dark blue line at the bottom is a recommended net zero by 2040 pathway. And actions, of course, that we take now allows the benefits of climate action to be felt earlier, such as cost savings, better air quality, and improved building comfort. We've added policies in the draft to require assessments and strategies to achieve net zero under centers, building new neighborhoods, and secondary plans. We've also updated references to extreme heat and future weather under structuring growth and the natural environment. Next slide. We have added a new climate emergency sidebar and new policies to address embodied emissions and to reduce energy emissions. We lost the presentation. I'll keep talking.
Yeah, sorry, I'll get the slide deck back up. It just closed suddenly.
That's okay. To address embodied emissions and to reduce energy and emissions intensive materials in new construction. And that's under centers, building new neighborhoods, apartment neighborhoods, and also secondary plans. We also propose to rename the energy strategy requirement as the net zero emissions strategy.
And first of all, a big thank you to everyone who came today, who spent an hour and a half with us to hear about the climate change and environment policies related to the official plan, and for sharing your thoughts and your questions. This is really important to hear from you, and we've had some great insights today around the implementation of net zero and protecting our private trees and the Toronto Green Building Standard and having a food lens. And so all those things were great to hear, and many more of the things we've heard today. So really appreciate it again. And I'll hand it over to Jane to also provide some reflections, but also go over next steps today.
Thank you. I was really impressed in the conversation today about the level of awareness and understanding from the participants and the questions that were posed. They'll cause us to think and review. So that's what was the point. So thank you very much for your input today. And we're not done yet. We're going to have another open house this evening, and we'll be moving forward with a new draft, and that will come to the May 31st Planning and Housing Committee. That's our statutory public meeting, and you're welcome to come and make deputations or submit comments at any time actually through the process up until then. And then if all goes well, we'll be at Council on June 15th. There are other official plan policy updates coming, as was mentioned earlier. So there's additional public and stakeholder meetings in late May, and also a citywide open house in June. And these policies will be coming forward to Planning and Housing Committee on July the 5th. So again, thank you very much. Welcome any comments you have for us going forward, and look forward to.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.